Welcome to Musical True Crime.
Fox Lake, Illinois is a quiet township of just 10,000 people. It's a village in Grant and Antioch townships in Lake County, Illinois, a mere 52 kilometers off Chicago. It was originally called Nipissing, and in fact there is a boulevard in the city that bears the name Nipissing. It's a boat-friendly city with over 20,000 boats. It's also a cottage-friendly city as it features 2,000 cottages. Another fact worth mentioning is that's where the talented and buxom Anne Margret once lived. The actress who shone along Jack Nicholson in Carnal Knowledge, and who's actually still acting, was 80 years old. Color me impressed, unlike Jack, who just gave up acting. Shame on you, Jack.
And Margret lived in Fox Lake, and that's how far she was kicking up her leg, holding hands with a bunch of other ladies in 1961. She was there for 6 years, ages 6 to 12. Born in Stockholm, Sweden, for 100,000 Swedes. Moved to Chicago. Doesn't have anything to do with our story. I'll stop singing, but I'm not sorry for sharing a few fun facts about the girl who played Suki in Murderers Row. Murderers Row.
It's time to call them as we see them. I'm here to tell you all about our new Mad Helm adventure, Murderers Row. It's a grabber.
Fox Lake is also the home of Lieutenant Joe Gliniewicz. Joe, or Joey as they called him in high school, was known as a local hero in Fox Lake.
Local hero.
Joey was born in Libertyville, Illinois. He had acquired his master's in criminal justice from Kaplan University and then attended Marmion Military Academy before joining the US Army. He subsequently served in the Army from 1980 until 2007 in active duty and then as reserve. He eventually left as a first sergeant. At that point he became a police officer and leader of the local police Explorers, that is a program for youth between 14 and 21 who want to become cops. He was married with 4 sons, and he was quite the man about town, known as Lieutenant or G.I. Joe. He was always happy, joking around. They did call him G.I. Joe because physically he resembled the all-American action figure of the same name. He wore fatigues and army boots every single day. He was also quite ripped. For a 52-year-old man, a month of retirement. He could bench sergeants in his sleep. But on the early morning of September the 1st in 2015, just as summer was winding down and folks were getting ready for Labor Day, everything changed. Joe appeared to be heading to work. He stopped at a Quickie Mart where he bought 2 packages of smokes. It was at that point that instead of going to work, as usual, he drove past and went to the cement plant. The cement plant was where he would train his explorers. He would also teach them how to stage crime scenes, amongst other cop things. At 7:25 a.m., the GPS tracking device in his car indicated that he pulled into the gate at the factory. 17 minutes later from then on, he phoned and said that he was being pursued by 2 white males and 1 black one, and that they were heading towards the swamp.
Headed to the swamp, to the marsh, we'll run for G.I. Joe. Our boys in trouble, I don't know about you, but we gotta help, cause we're the boys in blue, the boys in blue.
The wooded area appeared to be quite marshy. 3 squad cars were en route to find him and to suss out the situation. The dispatch kept calling him at this point to no avail. There was no answer.
740, what's your location?
6740, your status. Lake Unit 6740, checking your status.
The cops arrived and combed through the bush. No luck. No G.I. Joe. Then at 8:09, the dreaded news that no one wanted to hear: officer down. The 32-year veteran was discovered face down in the marsh. He had been shot twice and the second bullet ripped through a major artery, killing him within probably 2 minutes. Within minutes, hundreds of heavily armed law enforcement individuals were deployed. The village of 10,000 became a no-fly zone and the community was in lockdown. The following day, Labor Day, thousands of people lined the streets of this whistle-stop. Officers flew in from all over the country to honor G.I. Joe in an 18-mile procession. Helicopters flew over. There was a rifle volley. People tied ribbons around trees, posted signs throughout the town in his honor. Joe was so well liked, in fact, that 1,200 people attended his candlelight vigil. People were in tears. The youth he mentored were in tears. They wanted to be like him, and now he was dead. The hero was gone forever. It was an extremely hot day too. The temperature shot up into the 80s. Not just that, but there was these cop killers on the loose. Everybody hates cop killers and everybody loved Joe. They needed to find these bad dudes. 5 helicopters roamed the township looking for the suspects. SWAT teams, 45 cannon units. A grand total of 430 leads came in, but they were all dead ends.
Cops are now saying they found 9 DNA samples at the scene, and they're testing more than 100 people to see if they can find a match.
The following evening, a call came from a woman named Christine Kiefer, claiming that 3 men, 2 white, 1 black, approached her from a cornfield and tried to steal her car. 100 state and local enforcement set up roadblocks. They searched the area with the 3 air units for about 20 hours, but that lead eventually turned out to be just fabricated. Looks like Mrs. Christine just wanted her 15 minutes of fame.
In the future, everybody will be world famous for 15 minutes. Everybody.
Unfortunately for her, she was charged with 2 counts of disorderly conduct for falsifying a police report. She was convicted and had to pay $20,000 in restitution. The moral of the story: don't make up stories and try to fool the police, kids. Another empty lead came in. 3 men were reported roaming around aimlessly in the area. However, video surveillance showed them at an ATM, and soon after that they had an airtight alibi which proved that they were having breakfast at a local dive, and the waitress actually ID'd them in a lineup. They left a big tip. Big tippers usually don't gun down cops. But maybe they do. What do I know? What do I tip? The story became so popular that his wife, Melodie, even appeared on Crime Watch Daily, where she strongly disputed that it was a suicide or an accident.
There were things that were happening in our life that people who are going to commit suicide would never do.
And then there was Joseph Battaglia. He was an ex-cop from Chicago, called police agencies and media outlets claiming that G.I. Joe ended his own life. On September the 13th, he was charged disorderly conduct after threatening officials for not declaring Lieutenant's death a suicide. He was later sentenced to 1 year of supervision after pleading guilty. Battaglia's words were largely ignored and scoffed at. That being said, the investigators were looking at the crime scene and things didn't add up. The revolver, for example. The revolver was found 2.5 feet from Joe's lifeless body. Wouldn't the criminals just throw it in the swamp or take it with them? Why simply toss it on the ground where it could easily be discovered? Makes no sense, right? They also found pepper spray, a baton, and glasses within feet of the body. This kind of indicated some kind of struggle, but Joe's body, his body himself, showed zero sign of being in a scrap. He had no marks, no scratches, no bruises, just nothing. In fact, his clothing looked clean, orderly. It looked as it's just been ironed. The investigators were baffled. At this point, they began to dig deeper. Looking at Joe's records, they discovered that in May 1988, he was found drunk in his vehicle. And that it wasn't the first time. With the engine running full throttle and with his foot on the gas, the Gliniewicz had reported his truck as stolen. What they also discovered was that in records from 2003, he had threatened an emergency dispatcher with a gun and joked about putting bullets in a fellow officer's chest. A pretty tasteless joke, if you ask me. And the added irony is that he actually died of gunshot wounds to the chest. He'd also take his family to Wisconsin in a squad car, and he had pressured a female fellow officer 5 times to have sex, or else she would lose her job. Sexual misconduct and blackmail, that is pretty unbecoming for a local hero. He was suspended 30 days, in fact 6 5-day suspensions.
I'm starting to wonder if Joe's not the man we thought he was. I'm starting to wonder, I'm starting to wonder. I'm starting to wonder why Joe had DUIs and pulled his gun on other guys. I'm starting to wonder. I'm starting to wonder why Joe had no cuts and bruises after the fight. I'm starting to wonder, I'm starting to wonder. I'm starting to wonder. I'm starting to wonder. I'm starting to wonder. I'm starting to wonder.
In 2009, an anonymous letter was sent to the mayor of Fox Lake with 20 complaints of Joe destroying department morale. So Joe wasn't looking as squeaky clean as he initially did. In fact, he was looking like a man who had secrets to hide. But for the time being, the investigators continued looking for these 3 mysterious cop killers. Let's return to the crime scene. His belongings strewn on the ground seemed to be an attempt to mislead first responders and investigators to believe that it was a homicide. And for the longest time, they did believe that it was a homicide. However, let's not forget that Joe was specialized in staging crime scenes. He taught the youth in the Explorer program to do exactly that. There were no signs of him being dragged after the initial shot. Advanced ballistic testing with UV equipment confirmed that both shots were from close range. The first shot was aimed at his lower abdominal area, striking his cell phone and bulletproof vest. The shot was absorbed upon impact. It did not pierce his skin and left a 4-inch reddish bruise. The second bullet hit a major artery, however. Residue found in the interior of his bulletproof vest cover proof that in fact the gun was placed underneath his vest carrier when the fatal round was fired. The investigators' suspicion grew and grew and grew. Safe to say that at this point, the investigators started to really wonder if this was actually a suicide and not a homicide, as previously assumed. They searched G.I. Joe's phone, and there was 6,500 deleted messages. A number of very suspicious texts were uncovered. In one of these messages, he claimed he used the Explorer money to pay for a flight, which cost $640.70. Another text talking about the village administrators said, "She hates me and I've never said more than 3 sentences to her the year she's been here. Hates the Explorer program and is calling up my ass and the program, she won't sign off to move to American Legion, and if she gets a hold of the old checking account, I'm pretty well fucked. Another text read, between you and I'm having a great deal of problems with our new village administrator. Yet another read, you are borrowing from that other account. When you get back, you'll have to start dumping money into that account, or you'll be visiting me in jail. The 1600 and the 777 all came from there.
I'm starting to wonder why Joe had 20 complaints, maybe he's empty in vain. I'm starting to wonder why his gun wasn't thrown away. Oh, I'm starting to wonder why he threatened the administrator's life. Oh, I'm starting to wonder. I'm starting to wonder. I'm starting to wonder.
Financial statements were discovered unearthing the fact that he'd embezzled a 5-figure sum from the Explorer program, laundering the money and forged signatures on official documents. What was he using the cash for, you might ask? Well, records showed that he used the money for porn sites, gym memberships, trips, Starbucks, personal loans, mortgage payments, you name it. Joe had stolen thousands from his youth program and then staged a suicide to obscure his criminal activities. He wanted to die looking a hero. Investigators also found a vast quantity of military surplus gear in his police explorer headquarters, such as Kevlar helmets, radios, ballistic vests, combat boots, gas masks, and gun belts. It was later discovered through the authorities that it would have been unfeasible for Gliniewicz to provide documentation for these items because they were obtained using fraud, and in fact they were meant for actual officers and not the explorer kids. They weren't child's play. It all began to add up. Joe had heaps of experience staging mock crime scenes and teaching the police explorers how to stage crime scenes. In fact, the day his body was found was the day when his arch-enemy, the Fox Lake administrator, Anne Marine, was in the midst of doing a comprehensive audit of village finances. She had asked Joe to present financial records for the Explorer program and an inventory of its equipment. She wanted to see paperwork by 2 p.m. that day. However, by 2 p.m., Joe was long gone. He was singing with the heavenly choir of angels, although most likely he would have ended up in a much hotter place, if you know what I mean. Marin told reporters, he'd say, "Don't worry about that, stop asking questions." As she said, it was little red flags that wound up being bigger red flags. I say there was more red flags than communist China. In fact, the reason that it did take a while to discover what Joe had done was because she didn't immediately give her information to the authorities. Why? She just didn't believe that it was a suicide. His death left her more stunned than suspicious. "I was highly charged," she said.
You know, those 2 months for me were the most stressful of my career. And I will tell you, I was threatened. Social media went ballistic. Terrible things were said about me. I had elected officials and other employees come to me and say they were worried about my safety. Threatening phone calls were, a daily occurrence. And I lived through that for 2 months.
The truth was exposed. Joe was a lying, cheating fraud.
Let's not forget that Joe had a little affair. He asked his son to marry his mistress. Donald married his daddy's mistress. 3 months later they divorced. The marriage was a cash cow. Moo, 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 moo. Moo, moo, moo. I don't know what came of it by thousands of dollars in military benefits, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. They were milking the system for every penny, milking the system and squeezing the udders, squeezing the big fat titties of the system, the big fat titties, big fat giant squishy titties, oh, big, big, big titties.
George Filenko, who led the investigation as commander of Lake County Mayor Crime Task Force, said, with the staging of the crime scene, usually you have someone who tried to make a homicide look a suicide. This was the opposite. Public perception of Joe began to shift. He went from hero to zero in the blink of an eye. Investigators began to suspect that other people were involved. See, in the previously deleted text, he was writing to two different people who seemed to know exactly what the heck was going on and who were on board with the embezzlement. There was his wife Melodie and his son Donald. Melodie was arrested and charged with helping her hubby and blowing thousands of stolen dollars on vacations, movie tickets and restaurant meals. And in fact, there was $100,000 raised after Joe's death to help out the family. But all of that was being returned to the donors. Melodie's attorneys argued that the prosecutor withheld information as to why Maureen was forced out later. Maureen had lost her job, and Fox Lake Mayor Pony Schmidt testified that she was fired for not following orders and using very inappropriate language with employees. Nothing to do with Joe's case. Melodie's trial begins in February. The three men who were arrested in the early stages of the investigation, the three big tippers, filed lawsuits. The cops determined that Joe took his life amid fears that his embezzlement of funds from the Explorer program was about to be exposed. These innocent men were detained for many hours, and one of them said the officer tried to enter his home without a warrant. Cop killers are really disliked, especially among cops. And I suppose that the authorities thought that they were on the right path. But alas, they were not. Another unfortunate result of the fallout was that the Explorer program was disbanded. Many young police hopefuls were sorely disappointed. G.I. Joe had not only abandoned the kids, but this man whom they looked up onto turned out to be a total and complete sham. A lie, a fake. Oh, and another thing worth mentioning. Do you recall when I told you about how Joe purchased 2 packets of cigarettes on the way to the cement factory? Why would he do that if he was planning to suicide himself? You may ask. Part of staging a plausible crime scene is making it seem like the person in question actually did plan to continue living. By purchasing the cigarettes, he gave the impression that he was gonna continue living. At least until he had finished the smokes, I suppose.
So there you have it, the story of G.I. Joe. All that glitters is in gold. All that glitters is in gold. Everybody thought he was a hero, Sergeant Slaughter the Lion Toad. All that ethics that he sold down the river like his soul. I wish I knew why he took a turn, his reputation torched and burned, ruining lives and ruining hopes, slippery slopes, soap on a row. Oh, now we know that deep below he was a man who sold his soul to the vipers in the dark, to the vipers in his heart.
So there you have it, the story of G.I. Joe alias Joe Gliniewicz, a man of dubious morals who stole, embezzled, laundered money for 7 years without anybody knowing. A man who, on the brink of being found out, offed himself while staging it to look like a homicide. It was almost convincing, but not quite. What do you think about the case? Do you think Joe is just a misunderstood soul who made a few bad choices? Do you think Melodie deserves jail time? Do you think Donald should also be thrown into the slammer? Comment your comment in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to become a Patreon to get exclusive, never before seen content, and be sure to tell your friends about our channel. Comment below to let us know what cases you would like us to investigate. And remember, stay safe out